Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, who is in Minneapolis, former U.S. attorney and former FBI senior official Chuck Rosenberg, and Board Certified Forensic Pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee. Everybody, welcome. Gabe, tell us what's going on with that one juror.
Hey there, Katie. Well, first, regarding that last exchange that you mentioned, certainly there was an objection there by the defense, but the prosecution certainly got its point across, at least to the jurors, before that objection. But I do want to point out some latest information we're getting from the pool reports. Those one or two reporters inside the courtroom. There was some discussion this morning about one juror who says that she was watching television, watching a pre-recorded show. She then turned it off when she saw a lawyer. She also mentioned she had gotten a text message from her mother-in-law that said it looked like a bad day. And that's all she said. She did not say whether she replied. And the judge, it's unclear if he was half joking here, but he also asked her if she had a book deal in the works, to which she said, I don't know what to expect. So those are those little interactions with the jury. We don't quite know what to make of it, but it did come up this morning. She was brought before the judge. One other point I want to make, Katie, there is something different today with the second open seat in that courtroom. Now, we know that there has been one chair reserved for both a George Floyd family member and a family member for Derek Chauvin. Up until today, there had been no one sitting in that chair for a Derek Chauvin family member or friend or relative. Today, we're told, according to the pool reports, that there is someone sitting in that chair, a woman. It is unclear who it is, but they are the Floyd family member and the Chauvin family member or relative or friend are sitting separated by a deputy inside the courtroom. Again, we don't know who exactly that is, but certainly some dramatic testimony that we saw earlier today. More medical experts at the pathologist after lots of medical testimony yesterday. We are, of course, anticipating the testimony from the Hennepin County medical examiner later on this afternoon, Katie.
Really interesting atmospherics. Let's get down to that testimony a little bit more. Dr. Banerjee, the medical examiner's autopsy report was controversial from what it listed. Does it appear to you that this expert witness that we've been seeing on the stand up until now was brought in to contextualize the autopsy report or blunt the autopsy report? What's your take on this?
I think that's a great question. But really, I think Dr. Thomas laid the foundation to clarify, maybe broaden the understanding of the cause and manner of death, how that's obtained. And really then when they systematically go through the autopsy report with Dr. Baker, I think it actually preempts probably some of the defense questions and, you know, probably sets a scene for how all the data points in this case were put together.
Chuck, on a legal standpoint, what do you think of all the hypotheticals that the defense was throwing out?
Look, I understand why he would try and make the hypothetical, you know, removing John Wilkes Booth from the equation. What was the cause of death for Abraham Lincoln? It's a rhetorical question. It's a bit of a silly question. It's an argumentative question, which is why the defense attorney objected to it and the judge sustained the objection. That said, it's a really good point. And you know where you use it, Katie? Perhaps not in your redirect of your expert witness at trial, but there's a time and a place where it's wholly proper for the prosecution to make that argument. It's in closing argument. The audacity of the defense attorney to suggest that Mr. Floyd's murder was analogous to visiting a chiropractor and lying on his stomach, or the audacity of the defense attorney to suggest that the murder of Mr. Floyd was analogous to someone lying on their stomach by a pool in Florida. If you can't argue when you are questioning witnesses, you sure as heck can argue during argument. And so I think the defense attorney got a little too cute, went a little bit too far. And my guess, and you should listen for this, is that he is going to pay for that in closing argument when the prosecution presents its case to the jury. It was a mistake. I don't like the fact that prosecutor was arguing in his questions, but there is a time and place for it.
It is really interesting, and he did bring up a study about Canadian police officers in the prone position, and I wonder if that kind of backfired on him as well. Let me play that sound.
1.1 million police interactions, resulting in about 3,000 prone position arrests. That those these are real people, real incidents, right?
Yeah.
And in those 3,000 or so interactions, there were no deaths that occurred.
Isn't that amazing? When you consider that virtually every forensic pathologist in the United States has probably had an officer-involved death like this. How did they? It utterly baffles me, which is why I kept saying Canada, because I think, I don't know what's different.
You were asked about certain studies out of Canada.
Yes.
On the prone position.
Yes.
And now, and the findings out of Canada, supposedly with real police and real police settings, was no fatalities.
Yes.
Are you familiar with any such studies reaching that conclusion in the United States of America?
No.
What is so peculiar then about Canada that we're talking about Canadian studies here?
That's what I don't understand.
Dr. Banerjee, what was your take on that? I mean, it seemed almost as if he was arguing the prone position in itself wasn't dangerous, that has something to do with, I guess, the suspects that police officers are arresting here. The suspects here are just different and I don't know, more dangerous or more prone to dying than in Canada?
I was sort of lost on that argument and that study because I don't really care what happened in Canada. I don't think that's comparable to what we see in the United States. And, you know, just like Dr. Thomas said, I've handled these cases. I've been experts in these cases. And we all know that the prone position puts you at risk. Or I shouldn't say just the prone position, but being restrained in the prone position. So just because no one died there, I'm not sure that's analogous to what goes on here, not in my professional experience.
They made a point, the experts have made a point to talk about how the arms were behind the back and the body weight of the officers were on top of George Floyd's body as he was in the prone position. Chuck, one last question. The threshold that the prosecution needs to prove for Derek Chauvin's culpability here, is it just that he was a contributing factor or that he was the only factor in George Floyd's death?
Well, they have to prove a bunch of things, and they have to prove it by proof beyond a reasonable doubt and to a unanimous jury that Derek Chauvin caused the death. And in order to sustain a murder charge, Katie, that he did so intentionally, which is different than just causing the death. You could cause someone's death but not do so intentionally. If he did so unintentionally but recklessly, another thing the government has to prove here, that would constitute manslaughter. So it's not just that he caused the death, but also that he did it with some state of mind, either intentionally for murder or unintentionally but recklessly for manslaughter. So the prosecution, in my view, is doing a terrific job. I thought Dr. Thomas was wonderful, clear, credible, cogent, thoughtful, but they still have a long road to traverse.
They do, and the defense will have its turn to lay out its own case soon enough.